I couldn't believe my ears when my granddaughter whispered, "Grandma, your son and his wife are planning to take everything from you and put you in a home." I felt my heart skip a beat. Evelyn Harwood, 72, had always prided herself on being independent. Widowed for 10 years, she had built a comfortable life through decades of hard work and careful savings. She never imagined that the people she loved most, her own son and his wife, could betray her so completely. Derek Harwood had always seemed like the perfect son. Outwardly charming and polite, he was the kind of man everyone admired. His wife, Melinda, matched him perfectly, always cheerful and attentive at family gatherings. But Evelyn began noticing little things that didn't sit right. Bills she had already paid would mysteriously be marked as unpaid. Conversations between Derek and Melinda would stop abruptly when she entered the room. Sometimes they suggested that she consider moving to a retirement home, framing it as for her own comfort. But Evelyn couldn't shake the uneasy feeling behind their words. It was Clara, her sharp and observant granddaughter, who first tipped her off to the truth. The young girl had overheard Derek and Melinda speaking late one night, plotting how they could gain full control of Evelyn's finances and persuade her into a care facility. Clara's eyes were wide with worry as she revealed the details, and Evelyn's stomach twisted in anger and disbelief. How could her own son think so little of her, after all she had done to provide for the family? Evelyn began paying closer attention to her surroundings. She noticed subtle manipulations. Phone calls that Derek quickly ended when she approached, paperwork left open in unusual places, and even friendly neighbors casually echoing suggestions about retirement homes. Every small detail pointed to a growing pattern of greed and deception. She realized this wasn't just a fleeting thought or careless remark. It was a plan, and she was the target. The realization left Evelyn torn. On one hand, she loved her son and didn't want to believe he could betray her. On the other, she couldn't ignore the warning signs. Her mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do next. The betrayal hurt more than she expected, but beneath the pain, a spark of determination ignited. She knew she had to protect herself, her inheritance, and her dignity. Evelyn resolved to observe carefully, gather evidence, and understand the full scope of Derek and Melinda's intentions before taking any action. Though she felt vulnerable and alone, Evelyn's spirit was far from broken. She understood that those who appear kind and charming in public may hide selfish motives in private. The betrayal from her own family had been a shock, but it also awakened a quiet strength within her, a determination to fight back, to reclaim control of her life, and to ensure that justice, in one form or another, would be served. I felt a chill when Clara came to me one afternoon, her small hands clutching a few papers. "Grandma, I heard Derek and Melinda talking again," she said softly. She told me how they discussed selling the house and taking control of my bank accounts. Her voice trembled, but she was serious. I had always trusted my son, but Clara's words planted a seed of doubt I could no longer ignore. I decided to act as if I didn't notice anything. I walked slowly around the house, moved a little slower than usual, and even pretended to be weaker than I really was. I wanted to see their real behavior when they thought I was unaware. Derek would sometimes talk casually about what I should do with my things, and Melinda would smile in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Small comments and looks told me more than their words ever could. Every day, I tried to watch closely. I noticed how Derek would check documents and quietly move them aside when I entered a room. Melinda would mention things about my future in a retirement home, always making it sound like it was for my comfort, but the tone in her voice felt different. Clara gave me small details she noticed too, like the way they laughed at certain remarks or exchanged knowing glances. It was clear they had plans, and they did not include my happiness. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to believe my son would never harm me, that he would care for me as he always had. But another part of me remembered the evidence Clara had found. Overhearing their conversations, seeing the way they handled my money and property, it was hard to ignore. I didn't know what to do first. Should I confront them now, or wait and watch more carefully? The house that once felt safe now seemed heavy with secrets. I found myself doubting every word and every action from Derek and Melinda. At the same time, I felt a strange strength growing inside me. If they were planning something behind my back, I would not let them succeed. I needed to stay calm, patient, and careful. I could not let fear control me. Clara stayed close, always whispering updates and sharing what she saw. She trusted me, and I could feel her fear and worry as if it were my own. I wanted to protect her, but I also needed to protect myself. Watching Derek and Melinda, I began to understand their true nature, the greed hidden behind polite smiles and polite words. I realized that trusting my instincts and paying attention to details could keep me safe. Even though it hurt to see the people I loved acting this way, I knew I had to stay strong. I needed to gather proof, plan carefully, and wait for the right moment. Their betrayal had started, but I was not helpless. I could see their intentions clearly now, and I was determined to protect myself and my future. Derek and Melinda began acting even sweeter, but I could feel something wrong. They kept saying things like, "Mom, we just want what's best for you," or, "It's time to enjoy life without stress." Their voices sounded kind, but I noticed the hidden meaning behind every word. They wanted me to let go of control over my home and money. I felt torn and frustrated. Part of me wanted to believe them, but another part knew they were trying to manipulate me. I had to stay calm. I quietly started collecting evidence, going through letters, emails, and bank statements. I wanted proof of their plans, something solid that would show their true intentions. Clara stayed close to me, always careful not to be seen. One day, she showed me a small hidden recording she had taken when Derek and Melinda thought no one was listening. They were speaking about my inheritance, about how they could get everything and make me move to a retirement home. Hearing their real words was painful, but it also made me more determined. I began putting the pieces together. Every letter I found, every email, and that recording confirmed what Clara had told me. I realized that their guilt-tripping was just a tool to make me feel weak and unsure. They wanted me to believe I needed their help so they could take advantage of me. Even though my heart ached, I kept my emotions inside. I couldn't let them see that I was aware. I acted normal, smiled when needed, and pretended to trust them. At the same time, I worked carefully to make sure I had all the proof I needed. Clara and I became a team. She would watch quietly while I checked documents, and I would guide her on what to notice. With the recording and other evidence, I started feeling stronger. I realized I didn't have to be their victim. I could see through their lies, and I could protect myself if I stayed careful. Every time Derek or Melinda tried to manipulate me, I remembered the recording and the emails. Their words lost power over me. Instead of feeling scared, I started planning my next steps. I knew I needed to be patient and smart. I had proof of their betrayal, and soon I would use it. Even though it hurt to see my own son acting this way, I refused to give in. I learned to hide my pain, watch their actions, and gather more evidence. With Clara's help, I was ready to take control of the situation. I understood that staying calm, patient, and careful was the only way to protect myself and make sure they couldn't succeed. I reached a point where I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait. I decided I would not be outsmarted, no matter how careful Derek and Melinda thought they were. I moved quietly and calmly, making sure they never saw a change in me. While they continued acting sweet on the surface, I took my first real step toward protecting myself. I contacted a lawyer I trusted, someone I had worked with years ago. I explained everything I had gathered so far and listened carefully to the advice. My lawyer told me to keep documenting everything. I followed his advice closely. I wrote down every date, remark, and action I noticed, even small signs of pressure they put on me. I also started saving copies of papers, messages, and anything that could prove the truth later. I kept everything hidden where they would never see it. I knew I had to stay calm and make sure Derek and Melinda never suspected I was aware of their plans. I acted gentle and slow, pretending to need their support. I didn't argue, didn't question them, and never gave a hint that I knew what they were up to. I let them believe everything was going in their favor, so they would let their guard down. I began shaping a strategy that would turn their own greed against them. I knew that if they thought I trusted them, they would push harder and show me more of their true intentions. I pretended to listen to their suggestions, even when they casually mentioned things about my future or my property. I gave short answers and stayed quiet, letting them think I was slowly giving in. Inside, though, I felt heavy. The hardest part wasn't the planning or the secrecy, it was the betrayal. I struggled to accept that my own son could treat me this way. I remembered raising him, supporting him, and giving him everything I could. Thinking about that while watching him plot behind my back hurt more than I expected. At night, I would sit alone and wonder how things had come to this. It was painful to accept that someone I loved so deeply could see me as an obstacle. But I reminded myself I had to protect my future, my home, and my dignity. I couldn't let my emotions weaken my decisions. Even with the hurt in my heart, I stayed steady. I kept collecting evidence, following my lawyer's advice and refining my plan carefully. I knew I couldn't rely on trust anymore. I had to rely on my strength and my ability to stay one step ahead. I wasn't going to let Derek and Melinda take what I had built. I wasn't going to let their lies win. I stayed patient, calm, and focused, waiting for the right moment to take control. I started pretending to be weaker and more dependent than I really was. I acted like I needed Derek and Melinda's help for everything, even small tasks. I wanted to see how far they would push me and what they would say when they thought I couldn't notice. I tried to stay calm, hiding my real thoughts behind a gentle smile. Derek began making suggestions that worried me. He would casually talk about selling old family heirlooms, like they were just things we didn't need anymore. His tone was polite, but I could feel the greed behind his words. Melinda joined in with hints too. She would talk about legal matters and ways to speed up the inheritance, pretending it was for my comfort. Every suggestion, every word, felt like a test to see how much I would allow. Clara and I decided to be careful. We started secretly recording these conversations. I made sure the recorder was hidden while I stayed calm and acted unaware. Clara watched closely, making sure every detail was captured. Hearing them speak freely when they thought no one was paying attention showed their true intentions. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but also relief that I finally had proof. Every day, I noticed more. Derek and Melinda would drop small hints about what they wanted next. They acted casual, smiling as if they were being helpful, but their words revealed the plan they had for me and my inheritance. I stayed quiet and let them think they were in control. I didn't react, didn't argue, and didn't show that I was aware of their schemes. Recording their actions and words made me feel stronger. I realized I could no longer trust appearances. Even when they were polite and kind on the outside, their true motives were clear when I paid attention. I felt proud of Clara for helping me and careful about each step we took. It hurt to see my own son and his wife thinking about taking from me, but I knew I had to be patient. Every recorded word was another piece of proof, a step closer to protecting myself. I could see exactly how greedy they were and how far they were willing to go. I stayed calm and careful, pretending to need them while quietly planning my next steps. I knew that keeping my strength hidden was the best way to make sure I stayed in control. Even as they pushed further, I stayed alert and collected everything I could. I was ready to use the proof when the right time came. I wasn't going to let them succeed. I had the evidence, the patience, and the plan. I just had to wait and watch, making sure they never guessed that I already knew everything. I knew I needed support from people who cared about me, not from those who wanted something from me. So I quietly reached out to a few distant family members, people Derek and Melinda never mentioned when they talked about the future of my home and inheritance. I didn't tell them everything, but I gently hinted that something felt wrong. I asked small questions, shared small concerns, and watched their reactions. Many of them were surprised Derek had never included them in any discussions. Their surprise told me even more about how far he and Melinda were willing to go behind my back. I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof, so I stayed calm and careful. I kept contact with my lawyer as well. Every time Derek or Melinda made a questionable move, I quietly passed the information along. I didn't make a scene, and I didn't ask them to stop. I just let my lawyer collect everything. I wanted a record of every step they took, every hint they dropped, and every pressure they tried to put on me. My goal was to make sure they never knew they were being watched. If they believed I was unaware, they would keep revealing more. I kept my voice steady and my actions gentle. I acted like a confused older woman who trusted her son and daughter-in-law completely. Meanwhile, I made sure my lawyer and the family members I contacted understood something was going on. There were moments when it felt like too much. Hearing Derek suggest changes to my life, knowing Melinda was discussing things she had no right to talk about, it all cut deep. I had loved them, trusted them, and welcomed them into my home. Now I was watching them take advantage of me as if my years of care meant nothing. One evening, I sat in my living room, holding an old photo of Derek as a child. I remembered how proud I was when he graduated, how happy I felt when he married, and how much I believed he truly cared for me. Thinking about those memories made my chest tighten. It hurt to accept that the people you love can change into someone you don't recognize. But even through that pain, my resolve grew stronger. I realized I couldn't let my emotions stop me from protecting myself. I wouldn't let their betrayal break me. I had people on my side now, people who understood something wasn't right. And I had a lawyer who was aware of everything, tracking each move Derek and Melinda made. I reminded myself that staying calm and steady was the only way to reach the truth. They thought I was weak, but I knew I had more strength left than they could ever imagine. Their betrayal hurt deeply, but it also made me more determined. I wasn't going to let them take control of my life. I wasn't going to let them win. I continued preparing myself, piece by piece, knowing the moment for action would come soon. I knew the time had come to move forward with my plan. I needed Derek and Melinda to think everything was finally working in their favor. So I pretended to be sick. I walked slower, talked softer, and acted tired even when I wasn't. I let out small sighs and held my stomach like something hurt. I made sure they noticed every bit of it. One afternoon, I told them I had spoken to a doctor and that I might need more care soon. I didn't give many details. I just let the idea hang in the air. Their eyes lit up for a second, but they quickly tried to hide it with fake concern. I pretended not to see it. I kept speaking in a weak voice and told them the doctor suggested I might have to move into a care home the following week. They acted shocked, pretending to comfort me, touching my shoulder and telling me everything would be fine. Inside, I could feel the truth burning through their false kindness. The moment they left my room, I heard the change in their voices. Their steps became lighter, their whispers quicker. They didn't know I had placed a small hidden camera near the hallway. Later that night, when I checked the footage, I saw them celebrating. They thought I was asleep and couldn't hear them. Derek was smiling in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, but this smile felt cold. Melinda clapped her hands softly and talked about how things would be easier once I was out of the house. They even discussed what they wanted to do with the rooms, the furniture, and how soon they could start making changes. Watching them hurt more than I expected. I felt a heaviness in my chest, something deeper than disappointment. It was anger mixed with sadness, the kind that goes straight to the heart. It shook me that my own son could celebrate the idea of me being sent away. They weren't thinking about my health. They weren't thinking about my comfort. All they cared about was what they would gain once I was gone. I paused the video and sat quietly for a moment. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I asked myself how it was possible that the boy I raised with love had turned into someone who saw me as a problem instead of a parent. It is one thing to be greedy, but it is another to celebrate your own mother's suffering. But even with all that pain, I reminded myself why I had created this plan in the first place. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing it to save myself. The recording was exactly what I needed. Undeniable proof of who they really were and what they truly wanted. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. This was not the end of my story. This was the moment I had been preparing for. The truth was finally clear, and now I had the evidence to show it. I stayed calm, knowing the next step would change everything. When the day of the family meeting arrived, I sat in the living room with a calm face, even though my heart was heavy. I invited everyone by telling them I needed to talk about my transfer to a home. Derek and Melinda walked in acting innocent, pretending they were worried about me. I looked at them and felt a mix of pain and determination, but I kept my voice steady. Once everyone settled, I told them I had something important to show. I picked up the remote with slightly shaking hands and pressed play. The screen lit up, and the first recording started. Derek's voice filled the room, talking about things he had no right to talk about. Then Melinda's words followed, cold and shameless. A heavy silence fell across the room as the truth played out in front of everyone. I watched the faces around me change from confusion to shock. My relatives looked back and forth between the screen and the two people who had acted so loving for years. Derek and Melinda froze in their seats, their expressions tightening as they realized what was happening. I could see panic flash across their faces when they understood they could no longer hide. Then I showed the second clip, the moment they secretly celebrated. Gasps came from every corner of the room. Even I felt my stomach twist again, even though I had already seen it before. Hearing their voices so full of greed hurt me deeply, but this was the moment I needed the whole family to see. Derek stood up suddenly, trying to speak fast, insisting the videos were misunderstood. Melinda followed him, trying to twist the story, acting like everything was taken out of context. But there was no space for excuses now. Every word, every laugh, every cruel suggestion was clear. Their lies fell apart the moment they opened their mouths. I did not need to shout or accuse them. The proof spoke louder than anything I could say. My relatives looked at me with sympathy, and at Derek and Melinda with disappointment and disbelief. They had shown their true selves without even realizing it. By the time the last recording ended, The room was filled with a heavy truth that neither of them could escape. Their betrayal stood exposed in front of the whole family, exactly as it needed to be. After the family meeting, I worked closely with my lawyer to make sure everything was final and secure. We went through every account, every piece of property, and every document connected to my inheritance. I made clear that Derek and Melinda would no longer have access to any of my assets. At the same time, I updated my will to leave what was rightfully mine to Clara and the other family members who had stood by me and shown loyalty. I wanted to make sure those who cared about me would benefit, not those who had tried to take advantage of me. When everything was officially completed, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. I had been hurt and betrayed, but now justice was finally served. Derek and Melinda could no longer act as if they had control over my life or my belongings. They had shown their true nature to everyone, and the legal consequences now made it impossible for them to continue their plans. I didn't need to say much. The truth and the law had done the work for me. Seeing the change in them gave me a strange mixture of relief and calm. They were embarrassed in front of the family, and I could tell that people who had once admired them now looked at them differently. They faced the consequences of their actions, and I felt no anger at having to take these steps. It was not revenge for the sake of hurting them. It was protection and justice for myself and those I loved. Clara watched everything unfold quietly by my side. Later, she took my hand and whispered how proud she was of me. She told me I had been smart, strong, and brave, and that she had learned so much from the way I handled the situation. Hearing her words made me smile softly. I realized that even in the pain of betrayal, I had grown stronger and wiser. I also felt a deep sense of relief knowing that the future I had worked so hard for was safe. My home, my savings, and my legacy were secure, and I knew Clara and the supportive relatives would respect the trust one placed in them. It was more than just about money. It was about protecting what was mine and ensuring that kindness and loyalty were rewarded. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I had faced betrayal, observed the greed of those I loved, and taken steps to protect myself. The weight of uncertainty and fear had lifted, and I could finally enjoy the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. I had survived their deception, protected my family, and shown that even when betrayal comes from the closest people, patience, planning, and courage can restore balance. Clara hugged me tightly that evening, and I felt proud not just for myself, but for showing her that even in the darkest moments, strength and intelligence can triumph over greed and lies. After everything was over, I spent time thinking about what had happened and what I had learned. I realized how important it is to trust carefully and not take anyone's words at face value, even if they are family. Betrayal can come from those we love the most, and it can hurt more than anything else. But I also learned that patience, intelligence, and careful planning can protect us and make sure justice is served. I focused on the people who had stayed loyal through everything. Clara had been by my side the whole time, watching, helping, and warning me when she saw something wrong. Her support meant more than I could put into words. I also reached out to other family members who had cared about me and respected me. Spending time with them reminded me that there were still people I could rely on, people who valued honesty and kindness over greed. I thought about Derek and Melinda, and I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the betrayal and disappointment in someone I had loved, but relief that their plans no longer had power over me. I realized I couldn't change them, and I didn't need to. I only needed to protect myself and make sure the people who mattered to me were safe. My home felt lighter and more peaceful now. The tension and fear that had filled the rooms were gone. I could walk through my house without worry, knowing that my things, my memories, and my life were secure. I no longer had to hide, watch, or plan secretly. The home I had built with so much care was finally mine again, and I could enjoy it freely. Clara stayed close to me, and we shared quiet moments together. We laughed, we talked, and I could see the pride in her eyes. She had seen me face betrayal, make smart decisions, and protect what was important. I hoped she would remember these lessons for the rest of her life. That strength doesn't always show in anger, and that careful thinking can overcome even the deepest betrayal. I finally felt calm and content. I had survived the lies, the greed, and the deceit. I had stood strong, and now I could enjoy the life I had worked for. Sitting in my favorite chair, with Clara by my side, I looked around my home and felt a quiet happiness. I was free from deceit, surrounded by those I could trust, and finally at peace. Even after everything, I knew life would continue to test people, but I had learned that with patience, intelligence, and the right allies, no betrayal could take away what truly mattered.